the state of oneness between us and our creator, and looking for a knowledge to explain it all, such as understanding how unconditional love comes into play, the importance of the abilities of our spirit over the abilities of the physical part of us. So knowing the difference between those two abilities. And then once you know the difference between them, showing faith in the abilities of our spirit, such as our ability to be spiritually inspired, showing faith in that communication over our mental thinking, and showing faith in what we're spiritually aware of based on instead of our physical observations. Showing more faith in what we spiritually sense is true, what we know is the loving thing to do, over what we mentally believe is true, or what we mentally believe, or what we mentally want. Knowing those two things exist and they're in conflict with one another. When you show faith, when I learn, as I'm learning to show faith in these abilities and recognizing them as something just our spirit can do, that was created in everybody equally, and then learning to show faith in those abilities and expanding them and growing them. One of the most, and this is what everybody goes through and what people were talking about today, is when we're challenged the most, is when we are required to show the most courage and faith in those abilities and what they're telling us to do. Because if our spirit really is connected to a state of oneness with our creator, that's the most critical time that creator is gone, hey, I'm here to help you, Rich. When you're most challenged in life, now just show faith in me. And so learning how to surrender soul control over your life and soul ownership over your life to this conversation in our moments where we need it the most, that's where I find myself in right now. So being challenged in life. What I also find is in my life is I'm actually being drawn to things that do challenge me, where I don't stay in a state where I'm just safe all the time, or a state where I can say there's a comfortness in my life. I find myself not being acceptable to my future, to my life journey, that God, a higher power, is constantly saying, yeah, you've done that, but don't minimize what you and I can do together. And now I'm going to guide you to more challenging moments. And I'm going to ask you again, I want you to show faith in me. And a big part of knowing is what my role is in this state of oneness. Like God has its role, but I have my role too. And very often I've learned that when I'm being guided to situations that are more challenging for me, that I have to make sure I don't overstep my role and my boundaries. And so very often when I start to say to myself, hey, here's how I want things to be, I know I'm in the wrong direction, because that's my thinking going, here's how I want things to be. And God's going, did you ask me how I want things to be? Because your goal, Rich, of what you personally want is different than what you spiritually need. And so I realize there's two different goals in life. Like when I think too much, I say, here's how I want the future to unfold. What triggers with that is that when I do that, God says, Rich, I never gave your thinking the power to see the future. And so it's going to be afraid of it. Hence, that's where my mental worry comes from, and my mental stress and my mental anxiety. It always comes from when my spirit turns to my thinking and says, what do you think about the future? And God goes, you're doing it wrong, Rich. I never gave your brain the ability to see the future. Of course it's going to worry. Of course it's going to have anxiety. Of course it's going to be stressed out. Now, the life lesson for me is saying this: I'm not physical. That's something different. It's nothing more than something that our creator created for all of us equally. And this is what I mean about looking for knowledge that equally applies to all people. And so what Constance was just saying about meditation, just a point that I've learned from myself. I've never meditated. I never started any kind of spiritual change in myself where I said, hey, I have to meditate, because I didn't even know what meditation was, nor did I have anybody to guide me in that direction in this moment of my life. What I learned to do is to discover that there's a strength inside of me, the will of my spirit, that God created everybody equally to quiet my thinking. When I shift myself into a state of peace, that's the reward, where I know I was just successful. And then what I say to myself is, God created that. That experience of peace happens in every single person. And so I look at it, that's my starting point. So what I did is this: I took that state of peace and I brought it into my daily life. What I didn't do, which is different than how most people meditate, is they go into a meditative state, which is a state of peace and quietness and stillness. And then you take the awareness of your spirit and you say, God, can you teach me? Can you show me? Can I see what you see? Is what you're doing in a meditative state. What I did was, I didn't have those moments. What I did was, what the higher power was saying is, right, Rich, once you achieve that state of peace and quiet and stillness, now bring that into your daily life. Don't meditate and then say, okay, I'm done meditating, I'm going to go back to how I used to be. Stop minimizing what you and I are meant to do together. So if meditation is an opening up to a spiritual realm where we can be inspired with knowledge, why don't we bring that into our daily life and be that way all the time? Now that took me practice, that the will of my spirit to do that, to overcome this spiritually unlearned society and world, a lack of spiritual intelligence, where people are constantly making choices that are not aligned with love, and me to stay in alignment of love. That was my personal challenge. So it goes back to what Rondi was saying and Lilly was saying and Razika was saying, that it's about us. Nobody can help us call on the strength of our will that was created by God, so that we can use that strength to constantly stay in a state of oneness during our most challenging moments, especially when the world around us isn't getting it right. And so that's what I looked at. So in a nutshell, that's what I do all the time. And it's challenging. And there's so many aspects of my life, whether it be writing or doing physical work outside, or my relationships within people, when I had these moments where my brain says, I can't control this situation the way I want, but I want it to change, I've now looked at, I don't listen to that source, that mental source of guidance anymore, as a credible voice of wisdom. Hence, when I don't listen to it, the part of me, my spirit, that doesn't listen to it, now recognizes it as not a source of wisdom. So I don't have these moments where I respond with anger anymore or hatred. I have less moments of anxiety and stress and worry, because I know that my role when it comes to our state of oneness is God's in charge of changing people, not me. I can just change myself. So you guys are all doing all that in my eyes. You guys are focusing on just changing you and allowing you to be a point in people's lives, whether in yourselves and the lives around you, where you're going, yep, challenging moments and unlearned people, spiritually unlearned people, you won't see me respond the way you do. And then you're going to be a source of inspiration for people. How can you do that? How can you stay in a state of peace and happiness and tranquility and stillness and quietness? How can you stay in this moment? And you're saying, because my goals are different. I don't want anything anymore. I gave up living a life based on my mental wants. That is challenging. If you want to do something, you want to see changes in yourself, be aware, that's the ability of your spirit to experience a life. Just do it for a week where you give up completely anything you mentally want. Don't pursue it. Changing people, how you speak, how you respond to things, future goals, allow yourself to be inspired. Allow yourself to have an experience of your spirit where you're being drawn in a certain direction. That's not thinking. When you're drawn, when you're pulled, when you're guided, when you say to yourself, I just know I have to do this. Also say to yourself this, as you live your life, as you're going forward in your day, what do I sense would be an activity that I can get involved in that I'm going to receive a reward of enjoyment? What am I going to enjoy next? Because remember, God created that response in everyone. That's a response that people don't realize, that God created in all people, and we're meant to use that sense, that response of what I would enjoy as spiritual guidance. That's not thinking. So taking what God created in all people equally, expanding on it, and realize the significance of shifting our life for the better is key. So that's what I do all the time. And I apologize for taking too long.
Oh, what a great lesson. Before I go on, because I want to share something, and then we'll go to Sylvie. But Tammy, I know you have to leave soon. When you do, we'll say goodbye. But do you have a word you want to share?
I would go with self-awareness because,
Cool.
like you're always saying, know thyself. So if you know
Yeah.
who you are, then you know what your needs are, you know what you're going to tolerate, you know who you want in your life, you can make
Yes.
clear decisions, everything from that. So, oh, and I wanted to
Thank
say a
you.
quick thing to Rich. Yesterday, I did a fun exercise because I'm still so stuck in the head. I was going somewhere and I had the GPS on and it wanted me to make a turn I didn't want to make. And I was like, okay, I'm practicing following guidance because I knew which one I wanted to take. And I was like, I'm practicing following guidance. And sure enough, it took away that wasn't the best one. My one was the best, but I'm practicing following guidance, just the
Yes.
GPS, because I'm still not following the spiritual. So I really follow this surrender. It was a small surrender, but I'm surrendering my mental. So it was just a little,
Oh,
but baby
I
steps.
love
Baby steps.
Yeah. So
it.
yeah.
Thank you, Tammy. I love that. While I was listening to Rich, the word that kept coming up for me, and then I want to share something really quick. Was the word manifesting. Do you remember years ago, everybody was talking about manifesting, and you all know how much I hated that word. I used to say, man is feasting. For God's sake, don't you have enough? And I always attributed it to that 2005 crash. And then everybody went and bought houses, and then it all fell apart in 2008 because, quote unquote, they said we could manifest. Well, during those years, and I think it was 2005, I wrote down something to manifest, and it was comical. It was a house on the water, and there was a picture of a boat, and I had it on this board, right, and it was right in my office. 2 years go by, and I'm in the Georgian Bay, and we're coming back in. This was Mark's parents lived there at the time, and we're on a boat, we're coming in, and I remember standing up, and I saw my house. And I looked at myself and I thought, oh shit, here's the boat. And what I recognized in that moment was spirit. The other way I was doing it from my mind, this is what I like, this is what I want. Spirit says, you can have it, but it's not yours. You don't have to own it. I'm giving you the experience because you manifested it. You thought this is what you'd like, but you can enjoy it through others. That was a big lesson for me, a big lesson that I can still travel. I don't need to physically travel. I can go in my mind's eye with anything, anytime. It's exactly what you're saying, Rich. When we do it from the mind, it's from the ego and sometimes the arrogance, for myself anyway, of the ego. I remember Carolyn used to say to us all the time about the word deserve. Get that word out of your vocabulary.
Yeah.
We don't deserve anything. We're here to serve humanity. So if I can serve humanity by being on my son-in-law's now, he has his own boat, and enjoy that, I'm really happy that, quote unquote, I manifested that. It just wasn't mine to have. So yeah. But thank you for letting me share that. Sylvie, my love, you're unmuted.
Yeah,
Is there
yeah,
anything
I'm
you
going
want to
now.
share? Okay, honey, take care, Tam. Thanks for being here today, making such a great contribution. Talk again. Is there anything, Sylvie, you want to discuss this morning?
Not sure. A lot
Yeah.
of things happening where I work.